before we start, I just want to make sure that we all stay connected. So this is a QR code to our LinkedIn group where you will be able to see all the information about our webinars or some resources that we share. We will share also more resources after this meeting. So I just want to give everyone a minute to either scan the QR code, or you can also copy the link that it's on the website, on the chat, and then just request to become a member of the group if you aren't already. Just give everyone less than a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, Julie, the stage is all yours.
Thank you. Okay.
If anyone has questions throughout the webinar, please also put them in the chat, and we will then find some time to either answer, or we'll gather them and then put some of those answers in our LinkedIn group in a post.
Okay. I think we're ready.
We are.
Okay, thank you, Beatrice. All right, I'm going to move on to the next slide. First of all, I've got something to say about my slides. I really want to thank Beatrice for letting me use my own slides. Usually I know you have the ECIS background, but I've asked her to use these because these are a dyslexia-friendly font and background, which is super helpful for me, and I'm sure many of you as well. So thank you very much for that, Beatrice. So hello, everybody. My name is Juliette Veljic. I am an inclusion teacher, and I work at the British International School here in Stockholm. I am an experienced early years Senko, and I'm also a trained primary Senko. And I also am a mum to 2 neurodiverse boys, one of which has speech, language and communication needs. I must state that I am not a SALT, so I'm not a speech and language therapist, but I've worked closely with many in my experiences as an educator and also as a mum. And so that's where most of my key interests and my experiences come from. So I hope that you will enjoy this webinar, and I hope that you will find it interesting. Please bear with me because this is the first one that I've done with ECIS, so I am learning along the way, and I hope that you will be patient, but I also hope that you will enjoy it. All right, thank you. So our objectives for today are to recognise the importance of early intervention for children with speech, language and communication needs, to discuss the communication pyramid, to understand common communication challenges that young children may have, and to gain some practical strategies and resources to support children in the classroom. Okay, and excuse me as well while I peer at my notes sometimes. They are on the side for me today. I have a terrible memory, and so I do need to have notes from time to time. All right. So let's see. This is a short definition of SLCN from the UK NHS or England NHS. SLCN is an umbrella term used to describe difficulties with speech, language and communication. These can be a child's primary needs, or they can occur alongside other conditions. So it refers to difficulties within one or more aspects of communication, including speech fluency, the use of spoken language and the understanding of spoken language and communication tools as well. As I said, some children will have difficulty in one area, some will have difficulties in several. SLCN is considered to be the most common developmental challenge because a significant number of children in our schools and our nurseries and foundation settings have difficulties with speech, language and communication, particularly in our early years. These are a couple of facts for you. SLCN, as I said, is the most common type of special educational needs. Up to 10% of all children have long-term SLCN, so they will need long-term support. And in areas of social disadvantage, it can be that 50% or more children may start school with delayed language skills in the UK. These difficulties can impact learning. They can also impact social interaction, emotional development, if not identified and supported early. And actually today, if you read the Times Educational Supplement, there was a new article today about the effects of speech, language and communication in schools in the UK, and the difficulties that schools are having a lot of them post-COVID, and what they are doing about it. It's a very good article. If you haven't had a look at it already, I really recommend it. It's just come out today. So what would the future impact be for a child who has speech, language and communication needs? What might it be if they don't get the support that they need? Well, have a think about this statement first of all. A child's vocabulary at age 5 is one of the biggest predictors of academic success. So if you think about the children that are in your care and the language and their language ability when they leave you age 5 and move into primary school, that may be an indicator of their academic success. That may be a barrier to their learning for English and also for mathematics. So it is really important that we offer that, that we look at them and we try and identify children with SLCN, and that we offer interventions as soon as possible, and definitely in the early years, early intervention. What is the impact? Well, there are 3 areas that I've had a look at. So impact on learning, first of all. Children with SLCN often struggle with their literacy in both reading and writing, accessing the curriculum. So if they don't have the language skills, if they don't have the receptive, the understanding of language, they have difficulty accessing the curriculum. And also they often struggle with developing cognitive skills, those thinking skills, as language underpins all these areas of learning. SLCN is considered, as I said, the most common developmental challenge. So impact on behaviour. SLCN can lead to frustration, to acting out or to withdrawal, particularly when children cannot express themselves or understand others. You may find that miscommunication by a child with SLCN is interpreted as poor behaviour, when actually it's due to language processing difficulties. If you think, you might have a child who think, oh, well, they're really stubborn, they're not actually doing the things I want them to do, or they're not listening to me. It may be that there is an underlying SLCN needs there that's not yet been identified. Impact on emotional well-being. So difficulties in communication can result in low self-esteem, anxiety, and problems with forming friendships. Over time, this can affect a child's mental health, with increased risk of things like social isolation and exclusion. So you can see where this the difficulties with SLCN can impact many areas of a child's life, not just in learning, but behaviour and emotional well-being as well. So how do our children learn their language? I'd like you to have a look at this. This is the communication pyramid. Some of you may have seen it before. I just want you to have a look at it and see if you think it runs from bottom up or it runs from top down. You can put answers in the chat if you want to. So Beatrice, do you have any answers?
We have a couple coming in. They're all saying bottom up.
Yeah, that's right. So children start at the bottom and they gradually move their way up the pyramid. So the skills at the bottom come first, and need to be in place in order to support the development of the skills higher up. For example, a child needs to develop their attention and listening, before they can develop their understanding of spoken language. And when understanding is developed, then the child starts talking and they're beginning to express themselves. And finally, those accurate speech sounds come in at the top. Speech and language therapists use this pyramid to identify and decide where the gaps are with children that they're working with, and develop some appropriate aims and targets for their children that they're working with. I'd like to give you just a brief explanation of each part of the pyramid. So I'm going to start at the bottom there. So the first one says opportunity, reason, and motivation to communicate. So if you think back to babies and toddlers and how often they're surrounded by family, they're surrounded by people who care for them, and they're in this kind of language-rich environment. So they're surrounded by people modeling this communication, either through touch and human contact. They're able to hear the words around them. They're able to look and see facial features and facial expressions. And as I said, the baby is immersed in this rich kind of communication and giving them these opportunities and reasons and motivations to communicate. The next level is our early non-verbal skills. So if you have a look here, we've got listening, eye contact, shared attention, and turn taking. These all need to be in place before verbal skills. It's very important that the child has these skills so that they can build on their verbal skills that come later. So for example, eye contact, when a baby is making eye contact with their carer or their primary carer, that gives them endorphins, or releases endorphins in their brain. So it means that it encourages them to do that more. So once they've started to make eye contact, they will continue to do that with their main carer and then with other people. And that's the way that they learn to read kind of body cues, emotional cues, facial expressions. Listening is also a step in this tier. So respond to sounds around them so babies respond to sounds around them and human voices, but then they also learn to discriminate. So they might turn and be more responsive to a parent's voice or a regular carer's voice than they would to somebody that they don't know. So it's that kind of starting to do that discrimination of different voices and talking. Shared attention is another part of this tier. So that's when a baby and an adult are sharing an interaction together, looking at something together. So it might be where a baby or a toddler and a parent are looking at a book, and it's a lift the flap book, and so the parent is lifting the flaps and talking about the book, and the baby's looking and watching what the parent's doing, or even trying to do that themselves. So that's kind of shared attention. And the last one in this tier is turn taking. And this, again, is a skill that children need before they start talking, because it's a precursor to taking turns in conversation. That's serve and return. So turn taking is, for example, where a child has a ball, or a toddler has a ball, and they're rolling it to a parent or an adult, and then they're waiting for the ball to come back to them, and they're taking it again. Or if they're pushing a car, so they push a car to somebody, and then they're waiting for the car to come back. So that's basic turn taking. Then the next tier is that understanding of spoken language. So if you've ever learned a language, you will know that often your listening and your understanding of what somebody's saying to you comes before you can speak. And that's what's happening here with children. So they learn to understand language and understand what's being told to them or spoken to them before they learn to talk. So for example, you might say to the child, get the cup, and they can walk off and get the cup and bring it back, but they won't be able to say the word yet. So this is called receptive language. So the children are taking in those words, they understand them, but they're not yet forming those sounds to actually say that word. The next one in the next tier is talking. So that's where children are starting to name objects, and it might be that they don't say a whole word. So again, if you look at a cup, they might point and say cup, or they might say up, and they won't say the whole word, but it's still, if they do it regularly and they're using the same word for the same object, that is classed as a word, because they're giving meaning to that object. So using words comes first, and then a child has to have about 50 to 70 of these words before they start using phrases like more please, milk please, and then they will begin to talk in sentences. So that's that gradual development. And finally, at the top of the pyramid is using those accurate speech sounds. Now, it's very interesting in English that those sounds don't actually develop fully until a child's about 6 or 7 years old. So, for example, the final sounds in the English language, like th and r, are often mispronounced by children as a v or a w, and that's very normal. And children do take time to develop their accurate speech sounds. It's different, varies in different cultures and different languages, but in English it's about 6 to 7 that they start pronouncing all those sounds. There's a really good book that I recommend called Outland Early Language Builders, which has a checklist of when children should learn to speak should learn to pronounce different sounds. I find it very useful when I'm looking at children in foundation or nursery or reception, and I really recommend the book. There's also, if you look on the NHS England, there's also a speech checklist there that you can have a look at, and you can get a really good idea of what sounds children should be pronouncing at what age. So supporting these skills, so all the skills in this pyramid, will provide children with the very best environment to develop their language and their understanding of language. And I said before, speech and language therapists do use this as a model for language and communication, and try and make sure that they're closing the gaps for each child. I will be referring to this later on in our webinar today. So the importance of early identification and intervention. We've touched on this, but why can't we wait? Why do we need to do this so early on? Why can't we just wait until the children are school age? Or we've said about children, not pronouncing certain sounds until they're 6 or 7. So why can't we wait until then? Well, we have this critical window for development. So as some of you may know, initiating intervention during the early years is vital, as this period is marked by significant brain development and neuroplasticity. So this is the time when we can support a child to develop those connections, those neural connections, at a time when interventions will have the most impact on our child's development. Early support impacts long-term outcomes. So early support can lead to improved communication outcomes for children, better social integration, and enhanced academic performance. Delays in addressing speech issues may result in long-term challenges that we've talked about already, including behavioural problems, reduced self-esteem and well-being. So early support really does give lasting impact and long-term outcomes for children. Role of early years practitioners in identifying concerns. It's really important that we have knowledgeable early years practitioners, as we spend so much time with these young children. It's important that we play a role in early identification and support for these SLCN children. I'm going to move on to, now that we've identified kind of how children learn language and the importance of early intervention, I'm just going to touch on types of speech, language and communication needs. There are many different reasons why children present with SLCN, but for this presentation, I've simply just categorized them into 3 parts. So the first part I've put here is language disorders. So language disorders involve difficulty in understanding. So that's that tier of the communication pyramid. So that's receptive language, so understanding language, or using language, so expressive language, so finding the right words, affecting communication, learning and social interaction. Speech disorders relate to problems with the physical production of sounds, such as articulation issues. So this is where children are not pronouncing, not following the kind of normal path of pronunciation. Fluency disorders such as stuttering, or voice disorders. So those 2 areas, speech disorders and language disorders, they both may need long-term speech and language therapy or speech and language support from outside agencies, and both of them, a child can present with both of these, or it can present with one of these. So you may have a child that just has a language disorder or just has a speech disorder, but you can also have children who have both. And as I've said, these may need external long-term support. The third one I've put down here is delayed speech. So this is where a child follows typical milestones, but their speech can develop more slowly. So they are progressing up that communication pyramid, and they're getting the sounds at the right times for their pronunciation, but it might be that they are developing more slowly. Speech is often behind age expectations, but it may develop in the right order. So that's your delayed speech. It can often result from delayed speech. Excuse me. Not sure what's happened there. Thank you. It's just my computer, excuse me. So delayed speech can often be caused by trauma in childhood, or it can be due to premature birth. It can be due to hearing issues in early childhood. Hello? Okay.
I think we're good. I think it was a mistake.
Are we all right? Yes. Shall I carry on, Beatrice?
Yes. Carry on.
Yes. Have those tech gremlins gone away? Okay. I'm sorry about that. So it is important to note that, yeah, as I said, a child can have a combination of these. So this is just a run through. There are many different types of speech and language and communication needs, but I've just grouped them for you as a quick overview. So now we know kind of the importance of early intervention, how children can be affected when they have speech, language and communication needs, how children develop, how do we identify them? So that early identification, what do we look for and how do we look for it? And again, I'm going to refer back to this communication pyramid. So first of all, I would ask questions such as, has the child had enough opportunities to communicate? And is there eye contact, turn taking, shared attention, and tuning in to listening? So both of these things, it's really helpful if you have good communication with parents. We need to know a child's kind of birth and developmental history to build a picture of their communication and development. So we all know that it's really vitally important to have this good communication and trust with parents. And this is where this communication is very important, and we need to get this information from parents. So things like home visits or early information questionnaires that we can talk through and discuss with parents are really helpful, because that will give you the background to answer these questions. Also, observations in the classroom, or in your setting. Can you see, does the child make eye contact with you? Are they able to turn take? Is there shared attention? Are they tuning into listening? What do you observe? What do you see in your setting? And is there clear understanding as well? Can that child follow a simple instruction? Can they identify something that you've asked them to find for you? So again, that observations in your setting, kind of using these probing questions and watching your children in your setting is really important. Is the child talking using basic phrases and sentences? So having a look, listening to the children. When you are in play, really taking time to concentrate on their speaking and listening, modeling good language, but finding time and a space to really tune in and listen to the child and ask that question, looking at their language, looking at those language checklists. Are they progressing through that communication pyramid? Are there areas of language that they are struggling with? Are their sentences clearly structured? And do they have any speech mispronunciations? And yet that last one, our speech sounds clear and age appropriate. So again, using those checklists to check off, okay, is this child pronouncing things clearly? Can they be understood by their peers and by me? Are there any kind of behavioural cues there from frustration at not being able to be understood? And those are the things, those are the questions that I would ask based on that communication pyramid. That would be helpful to identify, or help us to identify, children with SLCN. One more thing that I haven't mentioned here is language screening. That is also very helpful. I know here at BIS we use a program called Speech and Language Link, where we use the screener for children from reception year 1 and year 2. It's an incredibly useful resource. And I would recommend it. There's another one called Welcome as well, that I know is used in a lot of schools in the UK and is helpful in identifying underlying speech, language and communication needs. So the other thing that you need to consider in support of asking these questions is any of the following kind of risk factors and red flags that will go together. So risk factors that could affect a child's speech, language and communication needs are something like a known developmental disorder. So is this child already diagnosed with something like cerebral palsy or autism or Down syndrome? Many experience have shown many of these children often need speech, language and communication support when they're kind of developing in the early years. Multiple languages in the home. This is an interesting one. I've put there a lack of mother tongue. We know that multilingual and bilingual children can have a huge cognitive advantage, really, when you're, able to speak and function in more than one language. But it can also be a disadvantage. EAL, so children that come into your setting with little English, can mask speech, language and communication needs, because, of course, you can't understand them, they're not speaking in English yet. So it can take more time for you to discover if they have an SLCN need. But also, this is where language history comes in. You may have families who are multilingual at home. So you have one parent speaks one language, one parent speaks another language, and then they converse with their children in a third. And sometimes this can be detrimental if that third language is not at a high level, because that means that child will not be getting that rich communication and that the rich and deep examples of grammatical structure and vocabulary that is needed for them to have the building blocks for learning a language. I've had experience of this in settings before, where children have come in and their parents say, "Oh, I'm not, I'm speaking to them in English at home now. I'm not using my mother tongue." And I really encourage parents to go back and use their mother tongue, because that's the language that they're strongest in, and that gives the child a really good modelled example of a rich and varied language. That's why I've put that one in there. Also, looking at history, as I've said before, it's really helpful if you can get kind of birth and developmental history of children that come into your setting, because things like glue ear, a history of ear, nose and throat issues, prematurity, or a family history of hearing issues can also affect children's speech, language and communication development. So again, if you are working with young children, having those that good communication with parents, doing those home visits, asking those questions to get that information is vitally important. And finally, neglect, and that can include affluent neglect, trauma, and adverse early experiences can also affect children's ability to communicate. Again, if you think of that communication pyramid, if they are not presented with those opportunities and motivation to communicate, they will struggle with their SLCM. So those are risk factors that you might want to consider. Red flags, excuse me, in the classroom, that could look like lack of engagement. I'm sure that many of you may use the Leuven scales of well-being and involvement to look at, observe your children and measure their engagement in class. And I think this is a great way for you to also identify children with SLCN, because if they're not engaging, if they're not joining in, if they haven't got high levels of involvement, maybe it's because there is an underlying need there. Children with limited vocabulary or unclear speech. Any child displaying behavioural or frustration clues, as we said before. Some settings I know experience children who bite, for example, and this may be because they're missing that shared interaction or turn taking, or that they have an underlying SLCN need and it's coming out in this frustration. Children who prefer to play alone or have little interaction with their peers. Children who spend a lot of time interacting with adults may also have this an underlying SLCN, because, for example, I was discussing with somebody today, adults might be safer to talk to. They might be able to be understood. So it might be that the child isn't speaking clearly, and so if they speak to an adult, they feel that they're going to be understood, or the other way around, they can understand the adult more easily than they can understand the other children in their setting. So this is really important as well, that kind of social isolation and social well-being. And the last one, difficulty following directions, instructions, or conversations. So again, this may present, or you may think that a child is just being stubborn, or they're not involved, they're not joining in, but it may be that there is an underlying need, perhaps a hearing need there, or a processing need, an underlying SLCN need that needs addressing. So those are the risk factors, and those are the red flags that we could consider when looking at children with speech, language, and communication needs. Right. So
Julie, I just want to let you know that we have 20 minutes left, just so you know.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we're nearly at the end of this part.
I'm just keeping the time.
Thank you, thank you. So we're nearly onto our breakout questions. So these are, I've just had an idea here for a practical strategy for support. I've put in one practical strategy and some resources. So practical strategy for support. This is also from the Elkland Early Language Builders. So this is the 5-finger rule or the hand rule. And it's a universal strategy. So you can use it with children with SLCN, or you can use it for all children. It's beneficial for. So first of all, if you have a think about your hand, you've got these 5 fingers. So using one as a question and using the other 4 for a comment. So 1 question to 4 comments. So for example, if a child's in the construction area and you're going away over there, you might ask 1 question and say, oh, what are you building? And then you use the 10-second rule. You wait for them to respond. And then you might make 4 comments, something about what the child is doing. Oh, I like the way that you've picked those cylindrical blocks. Another thing about what they're doing. Oh, you're stacking them so carefully. Something about what they're seeing. I can see that you can just about see over your tower. And then something that they're saying, yes, I wonder if you can build it as tall as you, before you go on to another question. Often we rush into our settings and we do go with a lot of questions. I still find this hard as well. So we're going in and trying to get these children to talk, and we're asking them things. What's this? What's that? How much is this? And we don't stop and pause to give them time to think, to give them time to comment. And we need to give them that time. And so I think this is a really useful strategy, this kind of 5-finger strategy. And also with this, I think it's really important when you are making those comments, if you are commenting on what a child is saying, just repeating back or expanding and building on the communication offered by the child. Okay, I'll whip on to the next one. Practical resources for support. So these are resources that you can also use in your class, and many of you may have them already. I'm a big fan of, for example, Widget, which you can see in the very middle picture here. Here are some visuals that you can use in your classroom. Visual timetables are always super helpful, and I'm sure many of you have those in your classroom. They help reduce cognitive load for children with SLCN because they can see the kind of routine of the day. Also, you might have things like now and next boards, so children know what's coming up. So visuals are a great way to help reduce that anxiety and that cognitive load for children with SLCN. I also have at the top right a PECS board. So PECS is also another resource that you may use in your school. And also for visuals, this is a communication board. So again, it's where a child can, a child who is struggling with communication or is non-verbal can actually express their needs and wants. So they've got the I want card at the top, and then they've got a selection of pictures on the card. I've seen this used very successfully excuse me, with a child that has communication anxiety in a foundation class. I also, you also need to know that it can take quite a long time to embed it. So for example, it needs, children won't automatically use it. It needs modeling. It needs modeling from an adult, and it may take up to 6 months for a child to be confident and to use it appropriately in the classroom setting. So yeah, you please by all means have visuals in your classroom. They're extremely important, but make sure that you are modeling them and then giving the children time to use them. They're not kind of like a short quick fix. The final resource that I've got here is something that I really love using when I'm in foundation stage, is Makaton. I find Makaton extremely helpful. I love all the actions. It's a very simple kind of communication tool. The actions are very, very simple to use, and you get these great visuals to go with it. I've found it's really good for children who are struggling with their social and emotional skills, because often when they can't express their language, they can use the action to tell you how they're feeling. And finally, my advice would be to reduce the background noise in your classroom. Now, this isn't always possible because classrooms are busy, full of talk, but finding an area that you can build in some quiet time, looking at the furnishings, some soft furnishings can kind of help to reduce noise, thinking about what kind of toys and things you can bring into that area. So there is kind of this quiet area where you can clearly model language and where a child can come and have some quiet conversation. Okay, so those are my kind of practical resources for support. Right. Thank you very much for listening. I hope that you have found the information I've given you useful. And now we're going to go out to our breakout discussions. So you're going to be in breakout rooms now. And I have 2 questions for you. So the first one is, what communication difficulties have you observed in your setting and how did you respond? And the second is, what strategies have you found helpful when supporting children with communication needs and what would you like to try? So I think you're going to be in groups of about 8 in communication in breakout rooms. And then if you can please come back and share, if you can choose somebody to share what you have discussed.
Before we go into breakout rooms, okay.
Sorry, B, I've just opened the
It's okay. It's fine.
We're going to.
Sorry.
That's all right. I think we're going to share. So I can't see anybody on my screen because I'm sharing my screen with my questions. But I think it would be lovely if we can share some of the things that you've been saying in your discussion. So, is there a group that would like to start?
I can jump in, Julie.
Okay, thank you, Charlotte.
We were saying that the difficulty we've experienced most frequently is about articulation of sounds correctly, and so the strategies have been linked to what speech and language therapists have provided. So often playing a game which encourages children to say a word using that sound with the correct articulation.
Yeah.
But we also said that after this webinar, we'd probably view that differently because we've definitely all had children who have had difficulties maintaining eye contact or taking turns, for example, and that we all probably would have, just as you said, labelled it as a behavioural need rather than a speech and language need. So we said we will probably think about that differently after tonight.
Okay. Thank you.
I think from my team, there was a great conversation. So Shane or Patience, if one of you would like to share what our thoughts were.
Jane can.
Oh, Shane.
Can you unmute yourself?
You're muted, Shane.
Okay, am I on now? Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, so we talked about some children that present with selected mutism, which is which can be tough because often we know, so we can see so much of what they already know, and we just want it to come out. So we don't have that in our. Let's go and get the school mascots. So we have mascots. We have class mascots as well, and they're just teddy bears. So penguins. We have penguins. We have peacocks. Every class has gives a name to it, and we talk to them. So I bought the school mascots, a leopard and a tiger in, and she read a little story, and she read it to them. You could tell I was on the side, but the focus was really reading it to them. So I just think sometimes little ones talk more readily, perhaps with teddy bears, with mascots like that.
Yeah, that's a great idea and great resource to have. Often with children who have speech anxiety, using kind of puppets, so it's like an inanimate object, is a great way to kind of slowly get them used to talking, because they know that that's something that's very safe. Thank you. Anybody next?
I can tell you about my group, Julie. Hello.
Thank you. Hi, is that
Hi.
Lizanne?
It is.
Hey.
Hi. We one of the participants, she was explaining that she's got an almost 2-year-old or just over 2-year-old child who's just started and is only communicating with mama and pointing at the door, and that's the only sort of words they're getting from him. We were talking about the anxiety of starting somewhere new and how actually that could take time to settle down, and actually how important it is to get the history from the parents to understand how he's talking at home, what languages they're using there, and to see if there is a deficit or if it's the same in both places.
Great, yeah. And it's also, if you have a child, we were talking about earlier, weren't we? If you have a child who is EAL, it's really those home visits, as I've said, and that those early conversations with parents, just getting to know how they're functioning in their home language. So if their home language is not English, you know, are they speaking clearly? How many words can they say? Try to kind of dig a little bit deeper and see if there's a match there, or if it is kind of early language learning. Thank you, Lizanne.
Julie, can I share?
Yes.
Yes, so I got dropped out of the breakout room, but I have something to share. So the children at school, they are primarily from Hindi backgrounds because Hindi is their first language. And to get them to understand basic instructions is fairly easy, but to move beyond sometimes becomes difficult. And of course, the 2-year-olds are very apprehensive, you know, settling in their beginning days at school. So while Shane ma'am mentioned that there are school mascots, we actually have the children's parents' photographs with us. And so we get them to speak and, you know, say their heart out to their parents if they wish to. Some of them even get their toys from home. Challenges of different sorts when children get to fight over toys, etc. But then it's always a good idea to take these children in a cozy corner and ask them to share what they wish to. I think emotions come out best when they talk in their home languages, and the teacher does respect that and eventually paraphrases everything that the child says in Hindi, and we paraphrase in English, so that they get to, you know, slowly gradually understand that in the environment at school there is another language that they are speaking, and you know, they do get to it. So these are some strategies that we use, and especially making sure that if the child is you know, in a not a very happy zone, then we pull the child out of the class. The child feels comfortable in a cozy setup, in a separate setup, also works well for the other children, because if they look at a wailing child, then they also get the same emotion for themselves.
Yes, it can be unsettling, can't it? So yeah, as I've said before, about thinking about your setup and how your kind of how your setting is, you know, what furniture you have, whether you can make these kind of cozy or quiet corners for children when they need them. And yeah, it is great that you have an area that these children can go to, or that you can take them to, for these kind of quiet, calming conversations. And I love the idea of having like pictures of their parents for them to kind of talk to. I was reading something actually the other day, I think it was Alistair Bryce Clegg has something on parent, like mini-me's, because you know, lots of settings have mini-me's for children, but now I think some of them have mini-me's for parents, so that then the children can bring their mums and dads into the setting and kind of play with them. But it's lovely to have that, so that they can actually sit and use their mother tongue in that way. It's a really, really great idea. Thank you for sharing.
Well, thank you, everyone, but especially thank you, Julie. We're coming to the end of this webinar, and first of all, I am impressed, Julie, by all the information you have shared with us. This has been super useful. I am actually I've been taking notes, and I will share a lot of your tips and suggestions with my team. So thank you for putting all this together for us. It has been very helpful. We are going to end this conversation, but before we go, I'm putting just in the chat very quickly. Again, the link to our LinkedIn group, just in case you guys are not part of it, that you can join. And we will be sharing more resources after this webinar that Julie has shared with us. Coming up next week on Monday, we have another webinar, and the link to the registration, it's also been just shared in the chat. So we're going to look at SEND from different perspective, and it's the person that is sharing this. He is a parent, a teacher, and a person that has been dealing with SEND in those three different roles. So we're looking forward to seeing you there and to learning even more from another person. Again, thanks to everyone for being here, and a big clap to Julie, because this was incredibly wonderful. So
Thank you.
thanks, Julie.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So I just wanted to finish off. These are the outcomes of
Sorry,
today's session.
I forgot that there was this last.
Yes. So thank you very much. So I hope that you feel that these outcomes have been met. I've really enjoyed sharing this information with you, and I hope that the resources that Bea is going to share with you are helpful for you too. So thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank you,
very
everyone.
much.
Bye.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye
Take
now.
care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.